Welcome to today's Explainer, everyone. Today, we're grabbing our stethoscopes and putting on our clinical hats. We're going to take a highly focused, objective look at a specific physiological condition and a pretty fascinating, non-invasive remedy proposed by the YouTube channel Natural Cures. We're tackling this strictly from a doctor's perspective. We'll diagnose exactly what the data tells us about why this happens, figure out exactly when medical intervention actually becomes necessary, and then meticulously break down this proposed natural treatment. So let's just dive right into it.
We're going to start out with a really direct, super relatable question from the source material. Have you ever looked in the mirror and noticed your eyelids drooping, or maybe the skin around them sagging? You know, our eyes make a massive difference in our overall appearance. When the skin around them starts to change, it's basically one of the first things we and absolutely everyone else notice. It immediately draws us into the physical reality of the condition. But looking past the mirror and the emotional response it might trigger, what is actually happening here on a physiological level?
Moving on to Section 1, the reality of proptosis. Let's build our clinical foundation.
Okay, so what's really interesting here is the formal medical terminology. This drooping of the eyelids and sagging of the skin, it's clinically known as ptosis. Establishing this specific term is actually absolutely crucial. It moves our conversation away from just, a general cosmetic complaint and grounds it as a definable physiological condition. It gives a specific name to what is happening to the tissue and musculature right around your eye. And by defining it clinically, well, we can really start to unpack the mechanics of it all.
So, why exactly does this drooping occur? Well, we have a clear diagnostic overview here that identifies 4 distinct origins of ptosis. First up, we have natural aging. That's the most common culprit, mostly because skin and muscle tissue naturally lose their elasticity over time. But it doesn't stop there. Ptosis can actually be congenital, meaning some individuals are literally just born with this specific muscular structure. And even more significantly from a doctor's perspective, it can pop up as a consequence of systemic diseases. The source specifically points out diabetes and nervous system-related problems as root causes. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates how something that seems like a simple cosmetic issue can actually be a massive red flag for deeper underlying health factors. So, understanding those causes naturally leads us to evaluate the physical impact.
Which brings us to Section 2, when vision is affected. This is the real turning point.
In the progression of ptosis, there's a very clear dividing line. On one side, we have aesthetic discomfort, right? Basically, the changes to our appearance that we might not exactly love when we look in the mirror. But on the flip side, we have actual vision impairment. In some cases, these drooping eyelids can physically obstruct the pupil and literally affect your ability to see. This is a crucial distinction. Clinically speaking, it's at this stage, when vision is actively compromised, that people usually need to start considering serious interventions. When it crosses that line from a cosmetic annoyance to a functional impairment, that is when invasive methods, like surgery, become necessary. But before jumping straight onto the operating table, the Natural Cures channel introduces a completely different approach.
Here's Section 3, the proposed alternative remedy. Let's look at this natural approach.
Now, if we view this through a clinical lens, this ingredients list acts as a sort of medical manifest. And honestly, it is surprisingly short. To create this non-invasive alternative, the recipe requires exactly 2 items, 1 egg white and 1 cotton swab. That is the whole shebang. It's a remarkably simple recipe using an ingredient you probably have sitting in your fridge right now. By isolating just the egg white, this remedy narrows our focus down to a single, easily accessible biological component to try and achieve its effects. So now that we've identified our active ingredient, we need to figure out the exact administration protocol.
Moving to Section 4, step-by-step application. Let's walk through the method.
As literally any medical professional will tell you, starting with a sterile, clean application site is paramount, and the instructions begin exactly there. Step 1 mandates that if you have any makeup on your face, it has to come off completely. Then, Step 2 requires you to wash your face thoroughly right after. This preparation phase is absolutely critical. You want to make sure the skin of the eyelid is entirely free of chemical barriers, natural oils, or cosmetics, just so the application can make direct, unimpeded contact with the tissue.
Next up is the extraction phase, and the instructions here are highly specific. First, you break the egg, and then you have to very carefully separate the egg white from the egg yolk. The source explicitly states that for this recipe, you only need the egg white, and this isolation is key. It ensures that whatever active properties are believed to be beneficial in the egg white aren't diluted or kind of messed up by the heavy lipids and proteins that naturally sit in the yolk. It's a very focused, targeted extraction.
Finally, we get to the actual application method. You're instructed to dip the cotton swab into that isolated egg white. Then, keeping your eyes closed, you just apply the egg white all over the eyelid. Now, what's genuinely interesting about this step is the mandated downtime. The final instruction is super strict. Keep your eyes closed until the egg white is dry. This clearly implies there's some sort of mechanical or physical process taking place as the liquid dries on the skin. Basically, the eyelid has to remain completely stationary to actually achieve the desired tightening effect.
And what exactly is that desired effect? Well, we return directly to the exact claim made by the source material. By following this simple one-ingredient protocol, the Natural Cures channel states that this remedy will quickly improve the appearance of drooping eyelids. We're just presenting this claim completely objectively, looking at exactly what is promised: a rapid, non-invasive aesthetic improvement using a super common household item. It's deliberately positioned as a first line of defense, a way to potentially delay having to consider those invasive surgical options we talked about earlier.
And that brings us to a really fascinating endpoint for this explainer. We've traced ptosis from its precise medical definition and root causes, from basic aging all the way up to systemic diseases like diabetes, right to that critical threshold where surgery becomes necessary. And set against that fairly heavy clinical backdrop, we have this remarkably simple egg white remedy. It definitely leaves us with a compelling thought to ponder. If a simple, single kitchen ingredient claims to have the mechanical ability to tighten our skin and alter our appearance, what other everyday items sitting totally untouched in our pantries might hold surprising physiological properties? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you next time.